I have you loud and clear.
Hello, Laurel. Thanks for meeting with us this morning. I'm Eleanor Dias, a student and ambassador in aeronautics and astronautics at Purdue. First of all, how was your New Year's?
It was amazing. We got to celebrate New Year's about 16 times as we orbited the Earth. Saw a bunch of new sunrises and a lot of fireworks all over the world. It was cool.
Thank you. We have a group of students here in Armstrong Hall eager to hear from you in a small window of time. Do you mind if we jump right in?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to start us off and ask that prior to becoming an astronaut, you worked on the engineering and operations of deep ocean research vessels and submersibles. Now, having worked in both deep ocean and space environments, are there any similarities that you've noticed between the research and exploration of both mostly unexplored frontiers?
I have. It's been kind of funny being up here just because there are so many similarities. But two things that immediately come to mind. One is that both fields attract really passionate people who are passionate about their work and also just in being part of making the world a better place or as good as we can. The second part of that is there's just an appreciation for the balance of preparation and adaptability. So both for space missions and also for the research that we do out at sea, we do as much as we can to prepare. We train, we get all the equipment ready, we try to think through every scenario that might happen out at sea or up in space. But then once you get out there, things always come up. The plans never go perfectly. And so being able to react in real time and build on all of your experiences and all of your preparation to come up with solutions in real time, that's very much a part of both worlds.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the other students who have questions.
Hello, Lauren. It's wonderful to meet you. I am Deepam Patel, a PhD student in computer science. My question is, most people don't realize that vast amounts of the research done in space also directly contributes to research on Earth. What are some of the experiments that you're working on right now, and how is your work supporting or adding to research efforts back on Earth? Thank you.
Thanks. That's a great question. And all of the work we do up here benefits everyone on Earth and also our future in space exploration. Some of the experiments that I've been involved in recently are life science experiments where we are investigating aging and the immune system and how the microgravity affects that. And then also our cells actually age faster when we're in microgravity. And so researchers on Earth are able to study aging and its effects on the immune system faster and in a way that they aren't able to on Earth. I've also been involved in another experiment called fiber optic production, where we are investigating creating new optical fibers in space that are better than those created on Earth.
Hi, Laura. This is Michelle from Purdue Polytech. Most people apply for astronaut training many times, and I was wondering, what is it that kept you going in between each round of applications?
It's a good question and also very true. I applied 3 times before I was selected, and I don't think anything really needed to keep me going. By the third application, I had found my way into work that I was really passionate about and really excited about doing, and I would have been very happy continuing to do that for the rest of my life. So I feel very fortunate in that regards. But I think that was kind of an important thing for me, was always doing something that I was really enjoyed.
Hi, Laurel. This is Partho. I'm a PhD student at the Mechanical Engineering Department. So I have a question regarding what are the top skills needed to better your chances of becoming an astronaut?
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, it's technical excellence. That's what gets you in the door. But there's also a lot of other qualities that are really important. One of those is having an operational mindset. So being able to think clearly and function well under pressure. One very important one is being able to play well with others. Our home up here on the International Space Station isn't very big, and there's 7 people living here. So being able to get along as both a teammate and a leader is very important. And then last of all, just being able to take care of yourself and take care of your teammates in environments that might be very abnormal, such as the International Space Station.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Adriana Waterford. I'm a freshman in FYE going into aerospace next year. My question is, what is the most beautiful thing you've seen in outer space?
Oh, there's so many. One, I mean, I love looking at the Earth outside of Cupola. That's one of my favorite things to do up here. Seeing Space Station for the first time was actually also one of my favorite memories about arriving to Space Station. I was looking out the window at Earth, and suddenly I looked up and I just saw Space Station, and it was funny because it was this like very familiar thing that I'd seen pictures of and seen so many times in training, but I'd never seen it in real life. And it was just so beautiful. This stark, just incredible piece of engineering against the blackness of space. It was just a really beautiful thing to see. And then lately, one of my favorite things has just been sitting in Cupola during a night pass and watching city lights go by underneath us, and then looking out at this just vast sea of stars. You really feel like you're in an ocean of stars, and that's been very beautiful.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jermo. I'm a junior in aerospace engineering. My question is probably not the most complex question to ask, but it's one that still interests me. What's it like going up on a Soyuz rocket? How would you describe the experience?
Well, launch day is one of my favorite days of my entire life. But going up on Soyuz in particular was really special for me. There's just so much history and tradition surrounding launching out of Baikonur. So that was really neat to get to be a part of. And then, but the moment you actually get to the rocket, you pull up in a bus and you're just right in front of the rocket. Like you get off the bus and you're standing right there next to it. And at that point, it's this like living creature because it's been loaded with propellants. There's there's
Welcome to the Astrobotics press conference. Our event should begin momentarily. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. If you're also monitoring the event video, please mute the audio on your TV or computer and listen only to audio from the phone. If you'd like to ask a question during the Q&A portion of the briefing, please press *1 to be added to the queue. If you'd like to withdraw your question, press *2. Do not use speakerphone when you ask your question. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Astrobotics' first Peregrine Mission 1 briefing since our spacecraft's journey began on January 8, 2024. We know a lot of you have been following along on this journey, and we appreciate your inquiries and your support as the mission unfolded. I'm Olivia Chaplow, the Director of Marketing and Communications for Astrobotic, and today's briefing will serve as an informational session concerning our Peregrine spacecraft, its in-space journey, the end of its mission, and implications for the space industry at large. Experts joining the call today from Astrobotic are John Thornton, our Chief Executive Officer, Dan Hendrickson, Vice President of Business Development, Sharad Bhaskaran, Mission Director for Peregrine Mission 1, Andrew Solorzano, Peregrine Flight Director and Principal Systems Engineer. Also joining us and from NASA headquarters is Joel Kearns, Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration in the NASA Science Mission Directorate. First, we'll start with some initial remarks from some of our briefers before opening it up for questions. We'll be taking questions on the line, so if you've joined us today, please press *1 to add your name to our queue and ask a question. We'll now begin with opening remarks from John Thornton.
Thanks, Olivia. Welcome, everybody. Just want to say right off the top what a wild adventure we were just on. Certainly not the outcome we were hoping for, and certainly challenging right up front, but man, got really exciting through the course of it, and there's a lot of story to tell here. So just to kind of rehash where we started, we launched on a United Launch Alliance rocket, taking off at 2:18 a.m. in Florida. It was a beautiful, perfect launch that went right at the beginning of its window. It was a true thrill to watch the launch from the roof in Florida and see the vehicle take off and blast Peregrine up to space. It was exciting to see the second stage ignite successfully and to watch all the way through a really perfect injection. ULA nailed it and sent a just perfect bullseye for the injection for where we wanted to be. At that point, that was when our job started. And one of our big nail-biting moments first was, will the lander turn on and start communicating back to Earth? And within a couple minutes of the opening of that window, we had comm. Power was up, spacecraft was operational, and things were looking good. And as we continued to turn on the spacecraft and initiate systems, within about 2 hours of the first turn on and communication, the propulsion initiation occurred, and that's where the challenges started. So the first parts of propulsion initiation worked really well. We were seeing balancing of pressures in the tanks as some of the valves started opening. Everything looked nominal. One of the final steps of that initialization is the firing of a valve to open the helium to the fuel side and the oxidizer side. The fuel side appeared to open successfully. The oxidizer side appeared to have a problem. And we believe that our leading theory has not changed at this point. We're going to be looking at this very heavily with a anomaly review board. But what appears to have happened is that valve connecting the helium to the oxidizer did not properly reseat and sent a rush of helium down into the oxidizer side. And I describe it as a rush because it was very, very fast. Within a little over a minute, the pressure had risen to the point in the oxidizer side that it was well beyond the proof limit of the propulsion tank and the oxidizer side of the tank. And we believe at that point the tank ruptured and led to, and unfortunately, a catastrophic loss of propellant at that point for the primary mission. I'll always remember the moment at Mission Control at ULA when we were coming from the highest high of a perfect launch and came down to a lowest low when we found out that the spacecraft no longer had the helium and no longer had the propulsion needed to attempt a moon landing. So that was certainly a tough moment for all of us. But what happened next, I think, was pretty remarkable and inspiring. Our mission control team in Pittsburgh kept their cool. They focused on the problem, and they diagnosed what occurred, and working with a clock on, because we had a problem where our solar panels were not oriented to the sun. We had just 6 hours between letting go of the launch vehicle and when the battery would run out for the team to diagnose what occurred, figure out how to fix the situation, and get us sun pointing once again. And literally within 4 minutes of the beginning of a loss of signal, expected loss of signal with the spacecraft that was going to likely cause the batteries to go down to critical or probably 0% and kill the spacecraft, one of our engineers on console, along with the whole team, was able to establish a solution and sent a command with 4 minutes remaining before that LOS to reorient the spacecraft and save the mission. But of course, we didn't know it at that moment that it had worked. We had to wait the entire LOS period to find out if that maneuver had worked. And it was quite a thrilling moment on the other side of that, to finally see the batteries starting to tick back up and the solar panels starting to generate power and provide power for the spacecraft. So that was a remarkable moment and a real, I'm just so proud of our engineering team and our mission control team for keeping its cool and working the problem and trying to find a great solution to keep the spacecraft alive. And at that point going forward, for the next several days and hours, we were focused on the fuel and trying to model what was occurring. Originally, the hole looked pretty big, but interestingly, over time, we actually think our current leading hypothesis is the tank, as it was lowering its pressure, started to seal the hole up a little bit, and the leak progressively got smaller and smaller through the course of the mission. And by the end of the mission, the leak was no longer the dominant issue with the spacecraft. So, of course, we didn't have enough fuel to do very many maneuvers, but it certainly changed over the course. We did continue to fly very successfully on our way out to the moon. On the way out, we activated all of the payloads that had power or could use power during the mission. We received successful signals from all of those payloads, and we got data back from all of the payloads that could send data. We were very pleased to see that. Interestingly, many of those payloads and that data, they were not intended to be turned on between Earth and the moon. And because of this anomalous state of the spacecraft, we decided to get as much of that as we could. And interestingly, a lot of those payloads were able to report some interesting data and some level of success from that. When we got back out towards the moon at about lunar distance, just a quick reminder that the moon was not there because we were doing a phasing loop around Earth, so the moon would have been back if we had gone back to Earth and back around out to the moon again. When we reached lunar distance, that was one of the first times that we got an updated trajectory analysis. And what that showed is that the leak that had occurred had done two things. One is it had veered us a little off course. You could think about it as like a left or right off course, but it had also slowed down our trajectory. And it changed the impact, it changed our trajectory to indicate that if we did nothing from that point forward, that we were very likely to return back to Earth. And at that point, we're talking Saturday, the 13th, we were assessing all of our options and trying to figure out what the next right path for the spacecraft would be. We reached out to our partners at NASA for their assessment as well. And that evening, we were faced with a very difficult decision on what to do with the spacecraft. We had an option of attempting to use our propulsion system to avoid Earth and go back out to the moon, or hold steady and have the spacecraft maintain the trajectory it was already on and intersect the Earth. At that point, we made the difficult decision, upon receiving recommendation from NASA, as well as looking at our own data internal, we made the difficult decision to do nothing and to not take the risk of firing those engines and to let the spacecraft fall back toward Earth. We did the best we could with the data that was available at the time. And then as we came back toward Earth, we continued operations and got as much from the spacecraft as we can. And then in the last few couple days right before entry, we felt it was necessary to do some maneuvers right at the very end of the mission to make sure that we could end up with a safe splashdown at the very conclusion of the mission. We did those maneuvers, which was again a proud moment for me to witness mission control and see what they did. We were able to activate the engines. We were able to fire all 5 main engines. We were able to maneuver the spacecraft in a unusual way. We were not able to fire the engines continuously. We had to do a series of small pulses. Those small pulses maneuver us away and put us out into a nice, safe location out in the ocean. And the final maneuver was very clever because they figured out and had characterized the leak at that point and figured out that if we could turn the spacecraft, we could actually use the leak to our advantage as essentially a continuous small propulsive maneuver that could push us further out into the ocean. So yesterday at around 3:50 p.m. we lost telemetry with the spacecraft, and 3:59 p.m. Eastern we lost ranging with the spacecraft, which aligns with our projected impact or projected re-entry at 4:04 p.m. Eastern. So since then we've been sharing images and video of the mission, and I'm I'll just reiterate once again how proud I am of the team and the mission control folks and everybody who's been involved with this program from the start. We did not achieve the primary objective of landing on the surface of the moon, but we had an anomaly, and after that anomaly, we just had victory after victory after victory, showing the spacecraft was working in space, showing that the payloads can operate.
Thank you so much.
And getting data back from those payloads and sending as much as we possibly can. So again, I'm just thrilled to be and honored to be a part of this team. And it's really been a special experience that I'll remember for the rest of my life. I do just want to read one quote from one of our payloads that did receive data, and this is a quote from Thomas Berger of DLR, the German Space Agency. And they had on board a radiation detector. So I'll just read this quote. The DLR M42 radiation detector was working perfectly throughout the whole mission timeline. We were able to gather over 92 hours of data measuring the radiation environment in free space during the mission, which is extremely valuable for the science community and for DLR. So I think we were very happy at the end that even despite our anomaly, we were able to get some good science data for our partner for DLR. So from here, our next steps, we're going to be very focused on analyzing this anomaly, make sure that our leading try to figure out exactly what occurred. As of now, our leading hypothesis has not changed, but we're going to be assembling a review board of many experts from across the industry to take a close look at this, to figure out exactly what happened. We are already assessing what those impacts could be for the Griffin program to make sure that this kind of anomaly never happens again. And we also are making sure to incorporate all of the successes of what worked on the Peregrine mission into the Griffin program to make sure that Griffin is successful. That mission is still scheduled for the end of this year, where we'll be flying once again, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And I can just say that I am more confident than ever now that our next mission will be successful and land on the surface of the moon, just seeing what our team did, what they went through, and what they overcame to get us to the unexpected but very exciting mission that we ended up with.
All right, thank you, John. And we have some other folks on the line too. So next up is Dan Hendrickson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Hendrickson. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at Astrobotic. I've been with the company for about 9 years now, and over that time, I've been working with the payload customers that we brought aboard Peregrine Mission 1. I'd just like to echo John's point that the payload teams achieved a lot on this mission. It's been really incredible and heartening to see the Astrobotic team working very closely with all the payload teams around the world. And I just want to note that they've been so supportive, and it's just been an outpouring of support that we've received from them. We do not take that for granted. Obviously, this mission outcome wasn't what we expected, but we are so grateful for their continued support and the fact that they were able to get valuable payload data that should benefit the entire space community around the world. So again, I just want to iterate thank you to the payload teams that stuck with us through this adversity, and we look forward to flying again.
Thank you, Dan. And now for Sharad Bhaskaran.
Good afternoon. Sharad Bhaskaran, Peregrine Mission 1 Director. I've been the director of this mission for 7.5 years. We've gone through a lot of highs and lows, but it's been ultimately a very rewarding experience, especially to still get a lot of data from the spacecraft and data to our payload customers. So happy to be here this afternoon.
Thank you, Sharad. And now we have Anders Lorzano.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Anders Lorzano, a flight director and the lead systems engineer for Peregrine Mission 1. I've worked at Astrobotic for well over 9 years since the start of the Peregrine program. I was on console as the flight director for a quarter of our mission time, and specifically during the launch shift, the main propulsion anomaly that we saw, the first main engine pulsing, and the Earth re-entry ops. I was pleased to have the opportunity to work with a dedicated mission team that behaves like a professional mission operations team despite the challenges that we saw. Glad to be representing this excellent team of astrobots.
And finally, we have Joel Kern. Joel?
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for having me be part of today's discussion. I'm Joel Kearns, and as part of my role at NASA, I direct NASA's Lunar Science Program, which includes commercial lunar payload services, where we work with industry to take NASA experiments to the moon. So as part of CLIPS, Astrobotic's Peregrine Mission 1 became the first American commercial lunar lander to launch on a mission to the moon. We know we will learn from each flight as we go into the future with more and more CLIPS deliveries as part of our Artemis initiative. There are currently 7 deliveries already awarded, and there'll be more in the future. Now, Astrobotic was very proactive in operating the payloads in their alternate mission. Efforts by the Astrobotic team allowed the Peregrine, the NASA science instruments on Peregrine, to collect data about the environment out in space from the Earth to the moon. All the NASA science payloads that could operate by being powered on did receive power and effectively gathered data during the time Peregrine was in flight. The NASA payload teams adjusted their operations and were able to demonstrate we believe that they could have operated if those instruments had reached the moon. Now, measurements and operations of the NASA-provided science instruments on board we expect will provide valuable experience, some technical knowledge, and some scientific data to future CLIPS lunar surface deliveries. 2 of the payloads, the neutron spectrometer system and the linear energy transfer spectrometer, or LETS, made measurements of that radiation environment in the space between the Earth and the moon. Now, a successful soft landing on the moon is extremely challenging. We've talked about this in the past. And exploring space is not for the faint of heart. People that work in space often say space is hard, for a reason. And our lunar delivery service model is a first for NASA. And this was the CLIPS model's very first lunar delivery, where we deliberately had U.S. industry provide the spacecraft and mission. And as with anything new, there can be risk, unforeseen things can occur. We share at NASA Astrobotic's disappointment that the Peregrine Mission 1 landing couldn't occur, but I'd remind people that breakthrough innovation doesn't tend to take place as a progressively positive series of events. Failure is often part of the road to success, and flying and landing a newly developed spacecraft in space or on the moon is extremely difficult, and that's why NASA has described this lunar service delivery approach as challenging. We're embracing a risk posture where we new companies will innovate, push the envelope, and we will all learn and grow from each flight. I want to add that it was really inspiring for us at NASA to see the public support and the public rallying around Astrobotic as it conducted the Peregrine 1 mission. Our CLIPS initiative is meant to grow a nascent space industry, enhance capabilities to get into cislunar space, making the moon more accessible to all. So we're really encouraged by the American interest in enhancing our exploration capabilities together. Now, NASA is committed to supporting our U.S. commercial vendors as they navigate the really difficult task of sending science and technology to the surface of the moon, because the benefits of this approach, when it succeeds, are going to be very great. We commend Astrobotic for its diligence, perseverance, and making every viable effort to collect all the data they can and show the capabilities of their Peregrine system while it was in flight. And together, we'll be able to use those lessons learned to advance CLIPS. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel, and thanks everyone for your comments. We'll now open it up for questions. Again, if you're on the line, please press *1 to submit a question. Once your name is called, please state your name, affiliation, and to whom you'd like to direct your question. If you find that your question has already been answered, press *2 to withdraw. All right, let's start with Marcia Dunn of Associated Press.
Can you say with certainty at this point that the Peregrine re-entered over the South Pacific yesterday afternoon and burned up? Did anything survive and impact the ocean? What specifics do you have on what went down? Thanks.
So what Astrobotic knows right now is that we lost telemetry at 3:50 p.m. and that we lost ranging at 3:59 p.m. We have reached out to multiple government entities and other folks to see if anyone else has any additional data or any other indication of positive reentry. We have yet to receive that confirmation.
All right, and our next question is from Joey Roulette from Reuters.
for John. What is the timeline for this next mission after, what happened with the first mission here? And for Joel, you had said that we will all learn and grow from this flight. Will data from the anomaly investigation with Peregrine be shared with Intuitive Machines, Firefly, or any other Eclipse companies? Thanks.
On the first question of timeline, so our plan is to continue to proceed with Griffin, which is currently scheduled for November of this year. We will wait to see what the conclusion of our anomaly review board is, to see how much impact, if any, that has on the Griffin program. We do expect some, we just don't know how much yet, and if that will impact schedule, it is still TBD. But right now we're just focused on getting to that program and flight as fast as possible.
And next
John,
up, sorry,
Joel.
go ahead.
Okay, this is Joel. For the second part of the question, John, do you want to address any of that from your perspective before I talk?
Yeah, I mean, sure. In terms of what we'll be sharing, I think we've been pretty transparent with what we know about the system. We are all about making space accessible to the world. That's part of our intention for being transparent, because we really view this as a challenge of humanity against the stars here. So we'll continue to be transparent with what we find and what we uncover here, so that we can all get better as an industry and as a world for returning to the surface of the moon.
Thanks, John. And I'll add that NASA will provide technical experts to Astrobotics Anomaly Review Board. What I have to say is that NASA does not share proprietary information from one company to another company. We can't. But of course, we will take the lessons from this in our thinking on CLIPS, and we'll encourage Astrobotic to share the findings with other companies.
All right, our next question is from Gina Sansari from ABC News.
Yes, thank you. One, I want to thank you guys for your incredibly transparent and timely updates throughout this whole mission. I think you set a standard for other companies. Moving on from that, I'd like to know what really surprised you. You talked about things you didn't expect, but what did you come away with saying, wow, I didn't know we could do that?
A lot of things through the course. I mean, obviously the anomaly surprised us. I thought there could be a chance of some failure at some point. I mean, because lunar missions are just so difficult. Only 50% of them succeed. I just didn't see that one coming for how that happened. But in terms of the surprises, probably my best surprise through the whole mission occurred, I think it was yesterday morning. Yes, it was yesterday morning when I came into mission control, because we were coming down to the closing hours of contact with Peregrine. And the night before, we had talked about trying to get pictures and trying to get one last picture as we come toward Earth. And an amazing thing happened. We knew that the sun and the Earth were almost in the same part of the sky where we were heading towards. We were heading toward Earth. So if you've ever tried to take a picture into the sun, it's really, really hard. And the first time we took that picture of Earth, we got a bad view. But our engineers, unbelievably, I still don't know how they managed to do this. They put the sun behind one of the very small struts that support our payload decks. So basically, it's like the equivalent of sticking one finger out in the sky and blocking the sun, and then they took a picture of Earth. And that picture we shared with the world, and that to me was like that was a big emotional moment, because I think that represented the best of Astrobotic in that moment. All of the things working that did work on this mission, and the ability for the engineers to troubleshoot that and orient it and aim the spacecraft in such a precise way. It was an impressive moment. So that certainly took me by surprise in a very good way.
All right, next up we have Irene Klotz from Aviation Week.
Thanks very much. First of all, I just want to echo Gina's comments about the transparency and timeliness. Thank you. For Joel or for John, did you meet the milestone requirements to receive the full $108 million payment from NASA? And for John, Before, during COVID, you had some supply issues like a lot of companies did. Was this valve involved in that? Have you traced the lineage of it yet? Thank you.
So on the first, go ahead, Joel.
John. No, go ahead.
All right. On the first question, so 10% of our award from NASA was subject to success criterion. We did not achieve all of the criterion to get all of that 10%. Though we did achieve some of those milestones. We believe that we've achieved 2 of those milestones. One was to achieve stable flight in space, and the second was to do payload checkouts. So we're going to continue the conversation with NASA on that one, but at least we believe we've hit those. But as with any milestone for any contract, there's always a review process and an assessment of that. And then secondly, in terms of the valve itself and any connection to COVID, it's too early to tell. The whole mission was always pressured by COVID and the challenge of a firm fixed price budget, where we had to make choices and decisions about what mattered most at any given time. And we had to make difficult choices all through the course of how much redundancy or not to do, what kind of valve and what kind of component for any type to do. And I think all the things that worked right means that we got most of those decisions right. But of course, the one that really diverted this mission and created a problem was one that obviously didn't work quite as we had expected. So we're certainly going to take a hard look at that. We've got multiple architectures, multiple valve options right now on the table that our engineers are poring over to make sure that this never happens again. But specifically, we can't tie it specifically to COVID at this point. It's really too early to tell.
And this is Joel Kearns, and I'll add that when any CLPS mission is completed, NASA determines the final milestone payment of any milestone that hasn't yet occurred based on the mission events that were achieved. And the maximum value, as John said, for this final milestone of this task order is 10% of that total task order value. So we haven't yet assessed all the activity in the mission to do an internal government determination of what the final payment will be.
All right, our next question is from Jeff South, Space News.
Hey, good afternoon. I'll echo the earlier comments about the value of the transparency. That's greatly appreciated. A question for Joel. The next astrobotic lander mission you have lined up under CLPS is for the Viper rover, which is a much more complex and expensive mission than Peregrine Mission 1. Are you contemplating any changes to that award, like additional testing milestones or such, to provide a better degree of assurance of success for that mission based on what happened with Peregrine? Thanks.
Hey, Jeff, this is Joel. What I would say is that we want to look forward and see the results of the anomaly review board to see what, if any, changes we need to make for the next delivery. As you said, the Viper is a very visible, very sophisticated, and costly payload that'll be brought down by CLPS. So we want to make sure we really understand the root cause and the contributing factors of what happened on Peregrine. And if we have to modify our plans for Griffin, which is Astrobotics' task order to bring Viper to the lunar surface, we will.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is from Jackie Waddles, CNN.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for doing this. Also want to echo the thank yous for the transparency. Quick question for John. Can you give some details on what exactly that fix was that your engineer on console came up with that kind of saved the mission in that final hour? Was it just that you didn't know that you could use the ACL thrusters at that point? Any details would be much appreciated. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, it's a fun story, and certainly a big turning point for how the mission unfolded. The engineer who actually found this, it wasn't their shift. It wasn't his shift. So he came in about a half hour before we were set to go into LOS. And all that time, mission control team was looking and looking and looking. And it just so happened that he was very familiar with one part of the code that could have helped the situation. And he found a way to basically send a guidance, navigation, and control update that kind of nudged the spacecraft and had it overcome the leak temporarily, so we could at least get around to the other side and turn the spacecraft toward the sun. The team worked very, very quickly to get that command as vetted as much as we can. Typically, commands like that are tested in our flat sat before we send it up, but in this case, it was very short. So the team worked very quickly to write that command up, get it sent, and of course, it happened 4 minutes before that LOS period. So the engineer's name is Josh Schaefer, and he's certainly one of the heroes of the mission here, and just so proud that it's a good thing that he was the one that built a lot of the systems. And I'm just so proud that he was able to find that and help save the mission and turn it into what it became.
Great. And now next up we have Stephen Clark from Ars Technica.
Thank you. And I think my question is probably for Joel and maybe John. What led NASA to make the recommendation to go ahead and allow Peregrine to re-enter Earth's atmosphere without doing a maneuver to potentially extend its lifetime? And for John, if you were able to save Peregrine for another orbit, what else would you have liked to have done with the spacecraft? Thanks.
Well, this is Joel. This is Peregrine Mission 1 was the Astrobotics mission and Astrobotics spacecraft, but as one of their big customers, under CLIPS, we shared with them our view of the information, our kind of background in similar discussions we've had for other missions, and our view of the risks. And we gave John and his team a recommendation based on that, knowing that John and his team understand their spacecraft because it's theirs and they built it, better than we do. But based on everything that Astrobotic had communicated, as many of you have pointed out very openly and transparently, as they stepped through the mission, we had told them what we looked as their customer and as someone with a bunch of experience, how we viewed the risks of going ahead and having this Earth-based entry burn-up disposal versus extending the mission. And we communicated that to John. John, do you want to add to that from your point of view?
Sure. The question was asking, what would we have done if we had extended it, and what was the decision? So the thing we were weighing was, should we send this back to Earth, or should we take the risk to operate it in cislunar space and see if we can send this out further? Obviously, everyone knows the decision at the end of the day. We wanted to make sure that we would protect the cislunar space. But to venture into that hypothetical that we did not end up doing, if we were successful with that maneuver, theoretically we could have maybe made it around the Earth and potentially could have come back out to the Moon. At that point, it would have been anybody's guess of what could have happened next. Maybe we could get an impact. Maybe we would have missed the Moon. Maybe we could have had enough fuel to get into lunar orbit. It's really the hypothetical world at that point. We just don't really know what would have happened next. But that was part of the challenge, and part of the risks that we were weighing is what's the responsible way to act here. We are setting a precedent for the future of how we operate in cislunar space and how we do these kinds of missions. This is one of just about 10 missions that just in NASA CLIPS that to be sent out to the surface of the Moon. And there's going to be human missions, and there's going to be international missions to the Moon. It's important that we all act as responsible parties in that and make sure that we're keeping the space available and accessible for all.
All right. Up next, we have Aria Alamahode from TechCrunch.
Hi there. Thanks for hosting this press conference, and I'll just echo what everyone else said about the transparency, and seeing the level of ingenuity from the Astrobotic team in real time was really remarkable. This question is for John. Just a quick one about the review board. When do you anticipate that review board being assembled and starting its investigation? And the second question is, I was curious if Dynetics or Frontier have been involved at all since this anomaly was identified, and if they will be involved through the rest of the year as you approach the Griffin launch? Thanks.
Sure. On that first question on the review board, the mission is still less than 24 hours from its completion. So we're shifting gears rapidly towards that, but we have not put that review board together yet. It's not done yet. But I think what's remarkable for that is we've gotten reach out from lots of experts from the world over who have volunteered to be a part of that, and I think that's really, really remarkable. And I think it's reflective of the industry that we operate in. There's times that we all compete because we're trying to get the next contract, but there's other times that you step back and you realize that really this really truly is humanity against the most challenging environment known to humankind, the space environment, and it's the camaraderie that comes out in times of challenge is remarkable, and we're certainly uplifted by that. What was the second question?
What was the second part of the question?
Might not have the mic.
All right.
Oh, the question was about Dynetics and Frontier and other suppliers of ours. So through the course of the mission, we did reach out to some of our suppliers to understand how things might operate in an off-nominal condition, including our propulsion systems. But I don't want to speak for those suppliers. But from what we got, we got what we needed to make the most of the mission as it is.
All right. Next up is Douglas Messier from New Space Report.
Hey, thanks so much. Question for Joel. Two questions. One, what was the value of the payloads that NASA had on this mission? And kind of a general question about how much technical support is NASA providing to the CLPS contractors in general? Thank you.
So the value of the 5 NASA supplied science payloads on PM1 was approximately $9 million. That's in addition to the task order value of $108 million. Now at NASA, it's because we're buying a service from the companies, and we're not buying actually a mission from them. We're not buying a spacecraft from them. We make sure they understand what information is available publicly, and in some cases, we give tutorials to all the CLPS companies on certain topics, but we do not tell them how to design their spacecraft or how to architect it. We rely on them to do that because we really want to buy this as a service from them. And industry for many years and why we went down this route about 5 or 6 years ago is industry for many years has told NASA that they believe they have the knowledge and the experience from a variety of space activities to do such a thing and provide an effective service of delivery of hardware and software to the surface of the moon and data back. And we really do not want NASA to be the one dictating solutions to other groups that are providing us a service.
All right. Next up is Will Robinson-Smith from Spaceflight Now.
Yeah, so thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and give us a thorough overview of the mission. Bit of a follow-up to Jeff Faust's question, I suppose, for Joel Kearns or perhaps John as well. Given that there's sort of some ambiguity as far as the timeline for the independent review of the PM1 mission, how soon would it need to be concluded and everything sort of buttoned up in order to ensure that a November launch date for the Griffin lander would be able to be preserved? Thanks.
This is Joel. I don't want to. Well, I would say that the effect it would have on the Griffin mission depends on the findings, right, and depends on what's identified that is applicable to Griffin. So I really can't speculate on what the timing is. I'll just point out that it's a relatively short period of time from today in January until the end of year Griffin mission. So we will not want to rush the findings. We will want to make sure that they're very well thought out and very clear and explained. And once we have them, we'll end up determining what action to take that will end up affecting the Griffin mission.
Yeah, just to add to that a bit, our engineers are already fully in gear. That review and assessment started seconds after the anomaly and has continued. We have yet to get outside review, and I think that's an important part of the review process, and we're going to be bringing those in. Our priority is mission success on the Viper program, and we're going to be making sure that we do a thorough assessment and make sure that we understand as best we can and understand all of the lessons learned of this and flow that into that program. It's to be determined. We have to see how this plays out and see how what the ultimate conclusions are from that review board to see if there are any impacts on that program.
Next question is from Lauren Grush from Bloomberg.
Thanks for doing this. I'm just curious what the discussions have been like with the commercial payload customers over the course of the mission, especially customers like Celestis, who are really intent on reaching the lunar surface. Just wondering how they reacted and felt about the entire process. Thanks.
Hi, yeah, this is Dan Hendrickson from the Business Development Group at Astrobotic. I'll offer that, of course, the customers were disappointed that we didn't reach the moon. They, of course, that's their original intent with this mission, but they also knew all of the challenges and risks of a lunar mission and how difficult it really is. I think when they came to the table, they implicitly understood that, but we didn't take any chances, and we outlined and explained all of those challenges and risks as they existed. And to their credit, they still signed up. They flew their payloads. The payloads themselves worked in cislunar space. And throughout that process, it's been just incredibly heartening to see their words of support. Over the course of the mission post-anomaly, we were very heartened to be completing the paperwork for a new payload. So they did not waver. Since then, we've also had additional dialogues with our existing Peregrine Mission 1 customers about flying again and being on future missions. So they're right there with us. They've stuck it out. They have been very committed to seeing this future on the moon a reality. And we are so grateful for their continued support, and we are also very grateful that they're getting usable data.
And a few fun stories that we heard through the course is that there were a few times through the course of the mission that we were communicating with some of our payload customers, and they said, "Stop calling us because we're fielding media interviews," because their country was so excited about it. And specifically, I'm thinking about Mexico and the Mexican Space Agency payload. They front page news above the fold. They were talking about how Mexico had the first instrument in cislunar space of Latin America, and that's a pretty great accomplishment. And it was exciting to see them celebrating that. Of course, we would have loved to bring that all the way to the surface of the moon, and I hope we will on a future mission.
Next up, we have Austin DeSisto from Everyday Astronaut.
Good afternoon. First of all, I just want to echo what everyone else has said so far. Really appreciate the transparency throughout the mission and for putting this all together and letting us ask questions. My question is really for John. Before launch, we had spoken, we met up and kind of talked over some of the items, some things you were concerned about. But one of the things we did focus on was about success and kind of how you define success and what you see as success. And what you had told me then was that, as soon as you separate, getting communication and orienting to the sun was one of those big, milestones we've made it items. And so I'm just curious if you want to talk through, kind of that beginning phase, which you had mentioned in your introduction, about kind of like how you saw success evolve throughout the mission and, how you were making it just milestone to milestone, trying to keep that spacecraft alive and see more success with it.
Yeah, I appreciate the question and very much appreciated our conversation in Florida before launch. It certainly was an evolving target. We really wanted to land on the moon this time. We really wanted to get there. That's been our company's heart of hearts mission and goal for 16 years. We didn't reach it this time, and that was difficult, and that was challenging to hear that news when we had that anomaly. But what lifted us up is really what happened next and all of the fantastic work that occurred from there. At that point, we knew we couldn't land, but at that point, we knew we had a spacecraft. We knew we had an orbiter that was in space. It was alive. Astrobotic had its first spacecraft in space, and it was still going. So from there, the mission changed. It was all about keeping the spacecraft alive. It was about once that was stabilized and the life support was supporting the spacecraft, then it became about activating payloads and trying to get as many wins as we can through the course of it, given the anomalies and given the challenges. One thing, though, that I am proud of is our goal as a company is to make space accessible to the world. And though this mission did not turn out the way we had planned, I'm really excited and proud of the fact that the world followed us and they were with us and they experienced the thrill of the space flight and the sorrow and the challenges and just the emotional roller coaster that goes with that. I'm proud of the fact that people followed along and carried with us, and I look forward to making all of those folks proud of us when we do succeed, and all of the folks that have supported us through the course of this. So it's been quite a journey, and I know it's very easy to focus on the failure and the one thing that failed on this spacecraft, and we're all going to have dreams of that for a long time to come. But there's a lot that worked. And that is something I'm very proud of. The Astrobotic design and built hardware, like avionics and software and systems architectures and other parts of the spacecraft, they all worked. We were getting images and video live back. Telemetry was working. Comm was working. Power was working. Solar panels were working. There were so many parts of the system that worked. So even though we had that anomaly right out of the gate, it felt like we were so close. That's why I really feel confident that the next mission to the moon will be successful. We know what this anomaly is. We have the team. We have the mission control team that can basically handle any stressful situation. I think if we get a good spacecraft built up, I think we're going to land late this year or with the Viper program.
Our next question is from Jordan Wright, the Angry Astronaut.
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks very much for everything you do. I have a follow-up question to what was asked before. You said that theoretically you might have been able to get Peregrine either to a lunar impact or orbiting the moon. Now, I understand the problems of having a potential navigational hazard, although there are much bigger pieces of space junk in cislunar space than Peregrine. So I'm curious, what would have been the downside of trying? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It was a very difficult decision and very, very difficult things that we were weighing there. We had asked our partners, and our partners at NASA weighed in with their recommendation, and their long storied spaceflight experience certainly mattered quite a lot in this conversation and the weighting of that. And what they were pointing out, and what we were also concerned about, was the engines and the fuel system were not in a nominal condition. Because the oxidizer, the pressure was so high and it was in an uncontrolled state, if we burned those engines at any significant length, it's, as the engineers were describing to me, it's basically like an oxyacetylene torch that is more or less going to burn a hole through those engines. So we were concerned about those small but possible probabilities that that it would be more than just missing a trajectory or more than just missing the moon itself. It could have possibly caused a catastrophic situation that it would potentially create more debris. So those are the factors that were weighed at the time. But it was a very, very difficult decision to make. But ultimately, we needed to do what we felt was right for us, for our partners, to be responsible actors in space.
Next up, we have Marcy Cipriani from WTAE.
Hi. Calling from a Pittsburgh TV station. So my question is, we're sitting outside Astrobotic Studio here in Pittsburgh, and what kind of work is being done inside now? What are we going to see moving forward here in our area?
Well, literally as we speak, I'm turning around to look through the glass because you're asking what's work going right now. We've got an engineer working on Griffin as we speak, assembling the next lander to go to the surface of the moon. And that, of course, can be witnessed right through the glass of our Moonshot Museum for all Pittsburgh and the whole region here. Astrobotic is still committed to the moon, still committed to making the moon accessible to the world. That has not changed. And I mean, I can tell you that we are emboldened by this. We are excited by this. Certainly not the outcome that we wanted, but we're motivated to make it successful the next time. We believe we've learned so much through this process that we truly can do that. And I mean, frankly, it was a fun adventure. It was a really fun adventure, not one that we had planned. We got knocked a curveball right in the beginning, but it was quite an adventure for the last 10 days, and I caught the space bug all over again, and I'm really excited for the next adventure.
Next, we have Marcia Smith from spacepolicyonline.com. Or maybe we do not. We may have lost you. All right. So next up we have...
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was asking Joel if he could just quickly review the CLIPS missions that are scheduled for this year for 2024. There were 6 total scheduled for 2023 and 24, so this was the first of those. Are you still expecting 5 more this year?
It's up to the companies, to update their launch timing based on their readiness with their launch providers. We do know publicly that Intuitive Machines has publicly said that they believe they're going to launch their first CLIPS landing in February. We know that that Firefly is planning to have a launch later this year. We know that Intuitive Machines is planning their second launch later this year, and you also heard about the Griffin mission to land Viper, planned for the end of this year. Of course, what we do is we're watching readiness milestones with our vendors that we've negotiated with them, and of course the launch date, is one of those things that we watch. But it is their mission. It's up to them. We do expect several CLIPS missions to take place this year. That's probably about what I can say today.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Some actually breaking news that we just received. We just received confirmation of the object's decay from the 18th. So that is independent confirmation that the spacecraft did, in fact, break up over the ocean.
Great. And next up, we have Evan Robinson from Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's been an honor to kind of tell the story for the Pittsburgh audience in the backyard. I understand the propulsion system for Griffin is different than Peregrine, and that decision was obviously made before this mission. I've heard, maybe potentially due to supply chain problems. But was that decision to change providers also based on any kind of performance concerns, anything that could have alluded to this valve failure before the demonstration this past week?
Yeah, I could talk to that. So there's a few different things. First is that Griffin is a much larger vehicle, so there's larger engines and larger tanks. It's a larger fuel system than Peregrine. It is almost about 3 times the size of Peregrine. So everything is different right out of the gate because of that. There are similarities in architecture, though those will be things that we're looking very closely at. There are some similar components. We will be looking very closely at that. The main engines and the attitude control thrusters are different than Peregrine and going to be provided by different vendors than the first one. That had more to do with challenges with vendors in the past in terms of schedule, and also we had a challenge on Mission 1 with performance of the main engines. So it all kind of factored and rolled together. But the new Griffin vehicle will have fresh engines for the mains and the attitude control.
All right, next question is Richard Trevaux from Orlando Sentinel.
Hi, thank you for taking the time. Sort of following up on that, you have Griffin coming up. You've launched Peregrine. I think previously you said that these are basically two items in your catalog now. My question is there signs of cost reduction for production? So would it be, and how quickly would you be able to turn around, say, a new Peregrine-style lander or a new Griffin-style lander after all of the fixes are in? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. So Griffin is in manufacturing as we speak. If we were to get another contract for a Griffin program, I think we could be off the ground in about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years in that time frame. So we feel very confident about that if it's very close to a build to print. And for Peregrine, it would be a similar kind of time frame if it's a build to print. And I'm qualifying it that way because frequently what we've seen from the payload community is the payload sometimes will ask for off-nominal or abnormal services, and that requires some more customization. So that customization is really one of the big drivers of schedule for us. So it's really kind of dependent on who's flying with us and how that one's going to be going. But right now we're just focused on our next mission, and business development continues to focus on new opportunities for customers and flights, and we'll of course be keeping you guys up to date on how that goes.
Great. Our next question is from Alan Boyle from GeekWire.
Hi. Thank you. I just wanted to find out if there was any more information about the confirmation relating to the spacecraft's decay. Is it visual sighting of debris, or is it more in the line of some sort of radio sensing of the breakup? If you have any more details, I'd love to hear. Thanks.
We unfortunately don't have any more details. The 18th just pointed us to a website. What's the website's name?
Space-track.org.
Space-track.org, where they track these incomings, and they posted on that the update for this spacecraft. We don't know how they confirmed it, but they did confirm it, and that's certainly good to hear. And I do. It might be a good, cool branch off point, but I do want to point out one really fun part of this story, is that there were optical telescopes that were tracking the spacecraft at multiple points through the course of the mission. And in fact, we were when we were at lunar distance and assessing what trajectory we were coming back toward Earth with, there were multiple optical telescopes that were reporting that yes, that we actually see the same thing, that you're on a trajectory to intersect Earth. And I thought it was phenomenal that we were getting that kind of feedback from folks all over the world. And what's even cooler, I thought, was that they were getting pictures. There are pictures of Peregrine flying through space that the optical telescopes have taken. And there were two in particular that I thought that was just really exciting. One of the groups actually took a video, very short video, and witnessed and recorded the very final burn of Peregrine's 5 main engines in the last maneuver that brought Peregrine home safely or brought Peregrine to the safe reentry to Earth. You can actually see the spacecraft going, and it almost looks like it lights up like a Christmas tree light, and that's the main engines firing. And then again, we saw, I think it was in Ken Chang's New York Times article, that he had a link to one of the videos of Peregrine flying its terminal descent down towards Earth, and you can see some kind of, it's either thruster or potentially even the leak itself that you can see. And I think that is just so cool that all these optical telescopes are able to track and see the mission and see Peregrine flying in space.
And we have time for one last question real quick. We have Ryan Ditto from the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review.
Hi, yeah. I'm just wondering if maybe John can explain a little bit more what Pittsburgh Mission Control did during this mission, and maybe just elaborate on how they were I guess specifically able to kind of help guide this along as it was going.
Sure. Basically, everything that occurred on this mission after separation from the launch vehicle all occurred from Mission Control Pittsburgh. It was staffed 24/7. We had shifts of 12 hours of each of our operators going in and out of shift through every single day. It was constantly being monitored. We had a team of orbit determination folks that were constantly receiving updates, giving us updated trajectory information live. The team was also coordinating with engineers from that were on site working in our flat-sat room, which is where we have a copy of the spacecraft, so we could execute test commands and make sure that it all worked. They were also reaching back to the engineers who had built the spacecraft at different points to get all of the available data to make the best, most informed decisions at any point during the mission. But Pittsburgh Mission Control was live. It was working great. And I'm very, very, very proud of the team that executed the mission.
So thanks to everybody for joining us today to discuss Astrobotic's Peregrine Mission 1. We realize there were a lot of participants on the call today. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We weren't able to get to all of them, but we open up to everyone to contact Astrobotic at press@astrobotic.com for any additional questions or to schedule interviews. Thanks again for joining us, and a recording of this briefing will be available on nasa.gov/clips. And that wraps things up for today. Thanks, everybody.